Kian had seen many strange things since joining the Galactic Council's engineering division, but nothing prepared him for the woman in the crystal veils. He first noticed her during the welcome reception on his third day at the massive space station. The hall was filled with aliens of every imaginable shape and color, all talking and moving in the careful dance of galactic politics. Yet there, standing perfectly still near a viewing window, was a figure draped in shimmering veils that caught the light of distant stars. She stood alone, completely alone. In a room filled with hundreds of beings, there was an empty circle around her, as if an invisible wall kept everyone at least 10 feet away. Kian watched as aliens walked past, their eyes deliberately turning away the moment they came near. Some even changed their path to avoid getting too close. It reminded Kian of how people treated dangerous machinery, giving it space and respect, but never acknowledgement. He leaned toward Ambassador Yuna, the human diplomatic leader who had been showing him around the station. "Who is that?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the veiled figure. Yuna's smile disappeared instantly. She grabbed his arm, her fingers tight enough to make him wince. "Don't look at her," she whispered urgently. "Don't speak about her. Don't even think about her if you can help it." Kian frowned. He had been an engineer for 8 years and had learned that when someone said not to ask questions, that was exactly when you needed to ask questions. "Why not? Who is she?" Yuna pulled him away from the crowd into a quiet corner where the noise of the reception became a distant hum. Her face was serious in a way Kian had never seen before. "Listen to me carefully. That is Princess Leora of the Veltharan Empire. She is cursed, and by their law, she doesn't exist. No one speaks to her. No one looks at her face. If you value your career and your life, you will follow that rule." "What kind of curse?" Kian asked. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in science, in cause and effect, in problems that could be solved with the right tools. Yuna sighed. "The Veltharans call it the sight beyond. She can see possible futures, multiple timelines branching from every decision. Their entire culture is built on the idea that fate is fixed, that every being has one true path. She threatens that belief. They think anyone who interacts with her will have their fate corrupted, their destiny twisted into something wrong." Kian looked back toward the viewing window. The princess was still there, still alone. So they just ignore her? Pretend she doesn't exist? "She's been isolated since birth," Yuna said softly. 23 years of living like a ghost. The Veltharans are one of the oldest and most powerful empires in the galaxy. We don't challenge their traditions, no matter how cruel they seem to us. The rest of the reception was a blur for Kian. He tried to focus on meeting other aliens, on learning about the station's systems, on doing the job he was hired to do. But his eyes kept drifting back to that lonely figure by the window. Eventually, she left, walking slowly through the crowd like water flowing around stones. People shifted away from her without seeming to notice they were doing it. Over the next few days, Kian saw her often. The station was huge, housing over 10,000 beings from hundreds of different worlds. But somehow, he always seemed to notice her. She walked the gardens alone, while others gave the space a wide berth. She sat in the observation lounges during the quiet hours when few others were around. She existed in the spaces between normal life, a shadow that everyone agreed not to see. Kian's friend Do-Yoon noticed his distraction. They were working together on a coolant system in one of the station's lower levels when Do-Yoon finally said something. "You're thinking about her again, aren't you? The veiled princess." Kian didn't deny it. "Doesn't it bother you? She's a person, and they treat her like she's invisible." Do-Yoon shrugged, his hands busy with a damaged conduit. "It bothers me plenty. But we're not here to fix alien cultural problems. We're here to fix machines. Stick to what you know, brother." But Kian couldn't let it go. That night, unable to sleep, he accessed the station's cultural database and read everything he could find about the Veltheron Empire. They were an ancient race, their civilization spanning nearly 50,000 years. They had mastered star travel before humans had discovered fire. Their entire society was organized around fate readers, religious leaders who interpreted the signs of destiny and guided their people along the proper path. Princess Leora had been born with abilities that far exceeded any normal fate reader. She didn't just sense the general direction of destiny. She saw it clearly, saw all the possible branches and outcomes. The priests declared her an abomination, a tear in the fabric of fate itself. Her parents, the Emperor and Empress, had no choice but to veil her and cast her out of normal society. She lived on the station as a representative of her empire, but only in the technical sense. In practice, she was a prisoner, trapped in plain sight. The injustice of it burned in Kian's chest. Maybe it was the human in him, the part that had been raised to believe everyone deserved basic dignity. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he just hated seeing someone suffer alone. 3 weeks into his assignment, it happened. Kian was crossing the central plaza, heading back to his quarters after a long shift. The plaza was crowded, full of aliens conducting business and socializing. He was tired, his mind on the hot shower waiting for him. When he saw her, Princess Leora stood near the fountain at the plaza's center. Her crystal veils caught the artificial sunlight, creating small rainbows that danced across the polished floor. For just a moment, Kian forgot Ambassador Yuna's warning. He looked directly at her, making eye contact through the translucent material. She looked back. Her eyes were violet, a deep purple that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. They were sad and wise and desperately lonely. In that single moment of connection, Kian felt like he understood her completely. She was tired. So tired of being nothing to everyone. Then the alarm started. High-pitched wailing filled the plaza as Veltheron priests in flowing robes rushed forward. The crowd scattered, people running in all directions. Kian stood frozen as 3 priests surrounded him, their faces hidden behind ceremonial masks. "You have looked upon the Cursed One," one of them said, his voice electronically amplified. "You have violated sacred law." Ambassador Yuna appeared, her face pale. "Please, he's new here." He didn't understand the protocols. But the priests were already pulling Kian away, their grip firm but not violent. He looked back over his shoulder and saw Princess Leora standing exactly where she had been, her veils now perfectly still. She hadn't moved, hadn't tried to run or explain. She simply stood there and watched him being taken away, and somehow that was worse than any punishment the priests could devise. The council chamber was cold and empty except for 3 beings. Kian sat in a chair that seemed designed for someone twice his size, facing the Arbiter's bench. Arbiter Thane, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a mantis, studied him with compound eyes that reflected no emotion. Ambassador Yuna stood beside Kian, her jaw tight with barely controlled anger. "You looked directly at the Veiled One," Thane said, his voice rumbling through the chamber. "This is a violation of Veltheran's sacred law, which all station residents must respect. The penalty is expulsion from this station and a ban from all Veltheron territories." Kian wanted to argue, to say that ignoring a person's existence was the real crime here, but Yuna squeezed his shoulder in warning. Before anyone could speak further, a soft chime filled the chamber. Thane tilted his massive head, clearly receiving some kind of communication through his implant. "There has been an intervention," Thane announced, sounding surprised. "Princess Leora herself has sent a sealed message to this council. She claims the violation was minimal." The human looked at her veils, not at her face directly. "This is technically permissible under the ancient laws." Yuna's eyebrows shot up. She defended him? Thane nodded slowly. The charges are dropped. You may go, human. But consider this your only warning. The massive alien's eyes fixed on Kian. The princess has shown you mercy. Do not test it again. Outside the chamber, Yuna rounded on Kian. What were you thinking? Do you have any idea what could have happened? I wasn't thinking, Kian admitted. I just saw her and forgot to look away. Yuna's anger softened slightly. She saved you. Why would she do that? Kian didn't have an answer. He walked back to his quarters in a daze, his mind replaying those violet eyes over and over. That night, Dayan came by with food and sympathy. You really know how to make an impression, Dayan said, handing Kian a container of something that smelled vaguely like noodles. First month on the station, and you're already facing expulsion. Why did she help me? Kian asked, not really expecting an answer. Dayan shrugged. Maybe because you're the first person in 23 years who actually looked at her like she was real. The words hit Kian harder than they should have. He couldn't stop thinking about it. About her. About the loneliness he had seen in those eyes. It went against everything his parents had taught him, everything humanity stood for. You didn't turn your back on someone who needed help. 3 days later, Kian made a decision that would change everything. His engineering clearance gave him access to most of the station's service corridors, the maintenance tunnels that ran behind every public space. He used them now, following the station's blueprints until he found what he was looking for. The princess's isolation chamber was beautiful, he had to admit. It was a dome of crystal and light overlooking the cosmos, with gardens inside that bloomed with alien flowers. But it was still a prison. Through the transparent walls, he could see her standing on a balcony, her veils moving in artificial wind. She was looking out at the stars, and even from this distance, Kian could sense her sadness. He found the communication panel near the chamber's entrance. It was old technology, probably not used in years. His fingers hesitated over the controls. This was insane. He could lose everything. But then he remembered those eyes, remembered the weight of that loneliness, and he pressed the call button dot inside the chamber. A light blinked. Princess Leora turned, her body language showing surprise. She walked slowly to the panel on her side and pressed it. Who is this? Her voice was soft, musical, carrying an accent Kian couldn't place. My name is Kian. I'm the human engineer who looked at you 3 days ago. Silence stretched between them. Kian was about to apologize and disconnect when she spoke again. You should not be speaking to me. It's dangerous for you. That seems to be everyone's opinion, Kian said. But you defended me to the council. I wanted to say thank you. I told the truth. You didn't look at my face. You looked at my veils. Actually, Kian said carefully, I looked at your eyes. I saw them through the veils. Another pause. Then I lied to the council. Why did you look at me? Because you're there, Kian said simply. Because pretending someone doesn't exist is wrong, no matter what culture says it's okay. You don't understand what I am, what I can do. Your fate could be damaged by contact with me. Kian laughed, unable to help himself. I don't believe in fate. Humans don't, not really. We believe in making our own choices. How can you not believe in fate? She sounded genuinely confused. Every being has a path, a destiny written in the stars. That's not how we see it. We think the future is created by the choices we make, not predetermined. Every decision opens new possibilities. Through the crystal wall, he saw her sit down slowly, as if his words had made her weak. That sounds terrifying. It is sometimes. But it also means we're free. We can fail, sure, but we can also succeed in ways no one predicted. We can change our minds, make mistakes, and try again. That's what it means to be human. They talked for over an hour. Kian told her about Earth, about human history, about how his people had spread across the stars, despite being the youngest species in the galaxy. Liara listened, asking questions that showed a sharp, curious mind. She told him about her childhood, about realizing early on that she saw things others didn't, about the day the priests declared her cursed and her parents had to veil her. "I see paths," she explained. "Every time someone makes a decision, I see the branches spreading out. I see what could happen, what might happen. It's like watching 1,000 rivers all flowing in different directions." "That sounds exhausting," Kian said honestly. "It is. Sometimes I can't tell which path is real, which one I'm actually on. That's why the priests say I'm dangerous. I make people uncertain of their fate." "Maybe uncertainty isn't a bad thing," Kian suggested. "Maybe it's just being honest about how the universe really works." He visited her again the next night, and the night after that. They talked about everything and nothing. Careful conversations between two people who weren't supposed to exist to each other. Liara told him about the books she read, the languages she had learned in isolation. Kian told her about his work, about the machines he fixed and the problems he solved. On the fourth night, Liara said something that made Kian's blood run cold. "I've been seeing your paths since we started talking. In most of them, you leave the station soon. You go home to Earth and live a long, safe life. You're happy. And in the other paths?" Kian asked. "In a few, you stay. You keep talking to me, and everything changes. Not just for us, but for the entire galaxy. The Veltheran Empire, the Council, the way species think about destiny and choice. But those paths are dangerous. There's a high chance you die. A higher chance you lose everything." Kian thought about it for a moment. Then he smiled, even though she couldn't see his face through the communication panel. "I told you, I don't believe in fate. I believe in choice, and I choose to keep talking to you." "Why?" Her voice was small, vulnerable. "You barely know me." "Because everyone deserves to have someone who sees them," Kian said. "And because you're interesting and smart, and you've been alone for way too long. That's enough reason for me." He heard a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob. "You're either very brave, or very foolish. My friend Do-Yun says I'm definitely the second one." "I think you might be both," Liara said softly. "Thank you, Kian. Thank you for choosing this path." As he walked back through the maintenance corridors that night, Kian knew things had changed. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Whatever happened next, he had made his choice. And like any human worth the name, he would see it through to the end. The rumors spread faster than Kian expected. Within a week, every human on the station knew about the engineer who kept talking to the cursed princess. Some thought he was crazy. Others thought he was brave. A few thought he was both. But one person saw it as an opportunity. Ambassador Yuna called Kian to her office on a rainy morning. The station had weather systems that mimicked Earth conditions in the human quarters, and today it was pouring. Kian sat across from her, dripping water on her expensive carpet, while she studied him with calculating eyes. "You haven't stopped talking to her, have you?" Yuna asked. Kian saw no point in lying. "No, ma'am." "Good." Yuna leaned forward. "I've been thinking. Humans have only been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. We're still the newcomers, still proving ourselves. But we've built a reputation for solving impossible problems. What if the princess isn't a curse at all? What if she's just misunderstood?" "That's what I've been thinking," Kian said, surprised that Yuna was on his side. "I'm assembling a team. Human scientists, researchers, people who can look at this situation without thousands of years of superstition clouding their judgment. I want you on that team. You have her trust, which is something no one else in the galaxy can claim." The team came together quickly. Dr. G1 was a xenobiologist who specialized in alien brain structures. She arrived with 3 assistants and enough scanning equipment to stock a small hospital. There were also linguists, psychologists, and cultural experts. All human, all curious about the princess that everyone else feared. The problem was getting access to her. The Veltheron High Council refused every request. They wouldn't even acknowledge the requests, as if pretending the humans hadn't asked at all. It seemed like another dead end until an unexpected message arrived. Prince Taeyan, Princess Leora's younger brother and heir to the Veltheron throne, wanted to meet with the human team. Secretly, they met in a neutral conference room, one of the thousands of anonymous spaces on the massive station. Taeyan was tall and elegant, with the same violet eyes as his sister, but without the weight of sadness. He wore traditional Veltheron robes that shifted colors like oil on water. "I've heard about your interest in my sister," Taeyan said without preamble. "The priests say you're fools who will be corrupted. But I've been watching humans since you joined the council. You don't think like other species. We try to solve problems instead of accepting them," Yuna said carefully. "Exactly." Taeyan leaned back in his chair. "I love my sister. I always have. But our laws forbid me from speaking to her, from even acknowledging she exists. When we were children, before her abilities fully developed, we played together. She was kind and funny. She didn't deserve what happened to her." "Will you help us study her condition?" Dr. G1 asked. "I'll do better than that. I'll give you full access to her, with her permission, but you must work quickly and quietly. If the priests find out, they'll send her back to our homeworld, to a temple prison where she'll never see the sky again." The first examination happened 2 nights later. Dr. G1 and her team set up portable scanners in Leora's isolation chamber, while Kian sat with the princess, holding her hand through her veils. She was nervous, her breath quick and shallow. "What if they find that I really am broken?" Leora whispered. "Then we'll figure out how to fix it," Kian said. "But I don't think you're broken. I think you're just different." The scanners hummed and beeped, collecting data that would take days to fully analyze. But Dr. G1's initial reaction was telling. She stared at her tablet screen, her eyes growing wider with each passing moment. "This is incredible," Dr. G1 breathed. "Your neural structure, it's not damaged or cursed. It's evolved. Your brain processes quantum probability patterns. You're literally perceiving the universe at a level most beings can't imagine." "But the fate corruption," Leora said. "Everyone I touch, their destinies become uncertain." "Because destiny was always uncertain," Kian said, suddenly understanding. "You just make people aware of it. Your gift doesn't change fate. It reveals the truth that fate was never fixed to begin with." Dr. G1 nodded excitedly. "Exactly. The Veltherans built their entire culture on the lie that the future is predetermined. Princess Leora threatens that lie by showing them reality. It's not a curse. It's enlightenment." Over the next few weeks, the human team worked tirelessly. They conducted more tests, analyzed more data, and built a comprehensive scientific explanation for Leora's abilities. But the more Kian learned, the more he realized the real problem wasn't Leora. It was Veltheron society itself. He was discussing this with Elder Suho, a Veltheron scholar who had secretly been helping the team. Suho was old, his face lined with centuries of thought, and he carried himself with quiet dignity. "I've studied the old texts," Suho said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before we became an empire, before the priests gained power, our people believed differently. We believed in choice, in the power of individual decisions. But the priests found that uncertainty made people afraid. So they offered certainty instead, even if that certainty was a lie. How did they gain so much control?" Kian asked. "Fear is a powerful tool. People would rather believe in a comfortable lie then face an uncomfortable truth. The priests told them their fates were written in the stars, that all they had to do was follow the path. It was easier than accepting responsibility for their own choices. And Leora threatens all of that. She is living proof that their worldview is false. That's why they fear her so much. Not because she hurt anyone, but because she make people question everything. One evening, after another long session with the research team, Kian found himself alone with Leora in her chamber. The artificial stars outside her window blazed with cold beauty. She had removed her outer veils, leaving only a thin translucent covering over her face. It was the closest he had ever been to seeing her truly. Dr. Jiwan wants to present the findings to the council, Leora said. She thinks she can convince them I'm not cursed. Are you ready for that? Kian asked. I don't know. I've been isolated for so long. The idea of being seen, of being acknowledged by my own people, it's terrifying. What if they reject the evidence? What if they decide the scientific explanation is just another form of corruption? Kian moved closer to the crystal wall that separated them. Then we'll figure out another way. But Leora, you deserve to live. Really live, not just exist in the spaces between everyone else's awareness. She stood and walked to the wall, standing directly across from him. Only a few inches of transparent material separated them now. You've given me something I never had before. Hope, even if the council rejects us, even if nothing changes. You've shown me that someone can see me and not be afraid. I was never afraid of you, Kian said softly. I know. That's what makes you special. Then, in a moment that made Kian's heart stop, Leora reached up and removed her final veil. Her face was beautiful, delicate, and strong at the same time. Her violet eyes were even more striking without the crystal barriers. She pressed her hand against the wall, and Kian pressed his hand to the same spot on his side. This is against every law my people have, Leora said, tears streaming down her face. But I need you to see me. Really see me. Not the curse, not the princess, just me. I see you, Kian said, his voice rough with emotion. I see a brilliant woman who's been treated terribly by people who should have protected her. I see someone who's survived 23 years of loneliness and somehow remained kind. I see you, Leora. She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. For just a moment, she looked her age instead of ancient and worn down. She looked happy. The moment was broken by alarms blaring throughout the chamber. Kian spun around to see Veltharan priests flooding into the corridor outside. Someone had been watching. Someone had reported them. And now everything they had worked for was about to come crashing down. The council chamber was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Word of the unveiled princess had spread like wildfire, and everyone wanted to witness what would happen next. Kian stood in the center of the chamber, feeling very small and very human among all these ancient species. Beside him, Ambassador Yuna looked calm, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. High Priest Naven stood before them, his ceremonial robes flowing around his thin frame. The human has committed the greatest violation. He has looked upon the unveiled face of the Cursed One. He has spoken to her, touched the barrier that protects us from her corruption. The penalty is clear. He must be declared fate-poisoned and exiled from all civilized worlds. The gallery erupted in discussion. Some species nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain. The human delegation sat in grim silence, knowing they had no real power here. They were too new, too young in galactic terms to challenge an empire as old as the Veltharans. Then Kian did something that shocked everyone. He stepped forward and spoke in a clear, steady voice. I invoke the trial of paths. The chamber fell silent. Even High Priest Naven seemed stunned. You cannot be serious. No one has attempted the trial in over 300 years. But it's still galactic law, isn't it? Kian said, anyone accused of fate corruption can challenge the accusation by proving that the future is not fixed. That choice matters more than destiny. If I succeed, all charges are dropped. If I fail, I accept exile. Arbiter Thane leaned forward, his massive frame dominating the judge's bench. The human speaks truth. The trial of paths is ancient law, older than even the Veltheron Empire. If he invokes it, we must allow it. He will fail, Naven said coldly. The trial has broken every being who attempted it. He will see the truth of fate and be destroyed by it. Maybe, Kian said, but I'm willing to try. Yuna grabbed his arm. Do you even know what the trial involves? Kian shook his head. Not really. But it's the only chance we have to prove that Leora isn't cursed, that her gift doesn't corrupt fate, but reveals truth. The trial was set for 3 days later. In that time, Kian learned exactly what he had volunteered for. The trial of paths was a quantum simulation, a technology so old that even the Council's historians weren't sure who had created it. The person undergoing the trial would be connected to Princess Leora's mind, experiencing the universe as she did, seeing all the possible futures, branching from every decision. The goal was to navigate through the probability storm and prove that choice. Not destiny, determined outcomes. Most beings who attempted it went insane from the experience, their minds unable to handle seeing infinite possibilities at once. A few died. None had ever succeeded. You can still back out, Delyan said the night before the trial. They were in Kian's quarters, sharing a bottle of earth whiskey that Doyun had been saving for emergencies. I can't, Kian said. If I back out, they'll take Leora back to their homeworld and lock her away forever. This is her only chance at freedom. And if you go insane or die, then at least I tried. Dojun poured them both another drink. You know what the worst part is? This is exactly the kind of crazy thing I'd expect from you. You've always been too stubborn for your own good. Kian laughed despite the fear churning in his stomach. Someone's got to be. The morning of the trial, Kian was taken to a special chamber deep in the station's core. The room was spherical, walls lined with technology that hummed with barely contained power. In the center was a chair, and beside it stood Princess Leora. She wore her veils again, as if the moment of vulnerability in her chamber had never happened. You don't have to do this for me, she said quietly. I know, Kian replied. I'm doing it because it's right. And because I believe in you. The technician strapped him into the chair and placed a neural interface crown on his head. Leora was connected to a similar device. As the system powered up, Kian felt a strange sensation, like his mind was expanding beyond his skull. Then the world exploded into possibility. Suddenly, Kian was experiencing life through Leora's perception. Every moment, every decision, every thought branched into countless paths. He saw himself making different choices, saw the outcomes of each choice, saw those outcomes branch into more choices and more outcomes until his mind screamed with the weight of it all. He was drowning in probability, in infinite variations of reality, all existing at once. In one path, he stayed on Earth and never joined the Galactic Council. In another, he died in an accident during his first week on the station. In 1,000 others, he lived long, safe, boring lives, but then he focused on the paths that mattered, the ones where he had met Leora, where he had chosen to speak to her despite the warnings. He followed those branches, watching them split and divide. In some, he walked away after their first conversation. In others, he continued talking to her, but never challenged the council. In a few, he stood where he was now, undergoing the trial. Kian realized something profound. Every choice created new possibilities, yes, but those possibilities weren't random. They were shaped by the values and desires of the person making the choice. Liara's gift didn't show predetermined fate. It showed potential shaped by character. He dove deeper into the simulation, experiencing different versions of Liara's life. In one timeline, she became a tyrant who used her gift to manipulate entire civilizations. In another, she lived her whole life in isolation and eventually went mad. In dozens more, she became a teacher, a healer, a leader who helped others understand the nature of choice. The key moment in every timeline was the same: the moment when she chose how to use her gift. When she chose whether to let her isolation make her bitter or make her compassionate. When she chose to help Tian at the council trial instead of letting him be exiled. She chooses, Kian said, his voice echoing through the quantum space. In every timeline, at every critical moment, she makes a choice. Her power doesn't control her. She controls it. The simulation shifted. Kian found himself facing a test, a moment of decision that would determine the trial's outcome. He could force Liara's future into the safest possible path, could use the quantum technology to lock her into a single timeline where she survived and was happy. It would guarantee success for the trial, would save both of them, but it would also take away her freedom. It would make her a prisoner of certainty instead of a prisoner of isolation. The alternative was to accept uncertainty, to prove that free will existed by refusing to choose for her, to show that in a universe of infinite possibility, the choice to believe in choice was itself the most important decision anyone could make. Around him, the simulation pressed in, demanding an answer. Choose safety and certainty, or choose freedom and uncertainty. The fate of the trial, of Liara, of everything they had worked for, rested on this moment. Kian remembered something his father had told him years ago, back on Earth. Son, the difference between humans and machines is simple. Machines always choose the optimal solution. Humans choose the right solution, even when it's hard. He made his choice. The simulation exploded with light. Kian felt himself falling, tumbling through layers of reality until he slammed back into his physical body. He gasped, his heart racing, his mind struggling to remember what it was like to exist in only one timeline. The chamber was silent. Every being present stared at him, waiting. Finally, Arbiter Thane spoke. The trial has rendered its judgment. The human has succeeded. He has proven that choice exists, that the future is not fixed, but created by the decisions we make. High Priest Naven looked like he had been struck. Impossible. The fate streams are real. Destiny is written. Destiny is written by those who live it, Kian said, his voice hoarse but steady. Princess Liara doesn't corrupt fate. She shows people the truth that was always there. We have choices. We always had choices. Your empire just convinced everyone to forget that. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some aliens cheered. Others protested. The Veltheron delegation stood frozen, their entire worldview crumbling around them. But in the middle of it all, Kian looked at Liara and saw tears streaming down her face behind the veils. She was free. They were both free. And the galaxy would never be quite the same again. The days following the trial were chaos in the best possible way. The Veltheron delegation locked themselves in emergency council sessions that lasted around the clock. Other species watched with fascination and concern as one of the galaxy's oldest empires struggled with a crisis of faith. And at the center of it all was a human engineer who had simply refused to accept that anyone should be treated as invisible. Kian spent 2 days recovering from the trial in the medical bay. Dr. Jiwan monitored him constantly, worried about the effects of experiencing quantum probability directly. His mind kept slipping into moments where he saw multiple versions of reality overlapping, but the episodes grew less frequent as the hours passed. "You're lucky you're not insane," Dr. Jiwan told him on the second day. "The human brain isn't designed to process information the way you did. Most species would have suffered permanent damage. But humans are stubborn, Kian said with a weak smile. We don't break easily. Leora visited him when the doctors finally allowed it. She wore lighter veils now, thin enough that Kian could see her face clearly. It was a small act of rebellion, but it meant everything. You did it, she said, sitting in the chair beside his bed. You actually did it. The Council is forcing the Veltheran Empire to reconsider my status. What do you want to happen? Kian asked. You could demand your freedom, demand to be acknowledged as a person. Leora was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking about that. For years, all I wanted was to be seen, to be normal. But maybe normal isn't what I should aim for. Maybe I should use my gift instead of hiding from it. What do you mean? I see paths, possibilities. What if I could help people understand their choices better? Not tell them what fate demands, but show them what their decisions might lead to. Help them make informed choices instead of blind ones. Kian felt a surge of pride. This was the woman he had come to know through their late-night conversations. Smart, compassionate, and brave, despite everything she had endured. That sounds perfect. But your people might not accept it. Some won't, Leora agreed, but some will. And maybe that's enough to start changing things. The breakthrough came on the 5th day after the trial. Chancellor Huan, the political leader of the Veltheran Empire, requested a private meeting with Ambassador Yuna and Prince Taeyan. Kian was invited as well, as a witness to everything that had happened. Chancellor Huan was an older Veltheran, his face marked with the traditional tattoos of his rank. He looked tired but determined as he addressed the room. I am a practical being. I care about the survival and prosperity of my people more than I care about religious dogma. The events of the past weeks have shown me something important. The galaxy is changing, and we must change with it, or be left behind. What are you proposing? Yuna asked carefully. Princess Leora will not return to Velthera as a prisoner. Instead, she will serve as our ambassador to humanity. If humans truly understand her gift better than we do, then perhaps there is something we can learn. This will also send a message. To our people, the change is coming, that the old certainties are being questioned. Prince Taeyan leaned forward eagerly. You're giving her freedom? I'm giving her a purpose, Juan corrected, and a chance to prove that she is not the curse our priests claimed. If she succeeds, it will open the door for reform throughout our empire. If she fails, the traditionalists will have their victory. But either way, we must try. It wasn't perfect, Kian realized. It wasn't the complete acceptance and apology that Leora deserved. But it was a start, a crack in the wall of tradition that had imprisoned her. Sometimes change happens slowly, one small step at a time. The official announcement came 3 days later. Princess Leora would remain on the station as the Veltheran Empire's ambassador to the human delegation. She would be allowed to remove her veils in human spaces, though she would still wear them in traditional Veltheran areas, out of respect for those who weren't ready for change. More importantly, she would work with Dr. Ji-Wan and a team of researchers from multiple species to study her abilities and develop ways to help others understand the nature of choice and probability. It was exactly what Leora had wanted, a way to turn her curse into a gift. The day she moved into the human quarter of the station, dozens of people came to welcome her. Humans mostly, but also younger members of other species who had heard about the veiled princess and wanted to meet her. Do-Yoon organized a party that lasted until the artificial dawn, with food from 20 different worlds and music that made absolutely no sense, but sounded joyful anyway. Kian found Leora on the balcony of her new quarters, looking out at the stars. She had removed her veils completely, standing in the open air, with nothing hiding her face. She looked lighter somehow, as if a terrible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. How does it feel? Kian asked, joining her at the railing. Terrifying, Leora admitted, and wonderful. I keep expecting someone to tell me to cover my face, to go back to my chamber and be silent. But it's not happening. I'm really free. You deserve it. You always deserved it. Leora turned to face him fully. I still see the paths, you know. All the possible futures spreading out from every choice. But now when I look at my own paths, I see so many more than before. So many possibilities I never had when I was isolated. Which path do you think we're on? Kian asked, echoing a conversation they had weeks ago. Leora smiled. That transformation of her face that made her look young and hopeful. I don't know, and I'm starting to think that's okay. Not knowing means I get to discover it as I go. Over the following months, Leora's work began changing the galaxy in small but significant ways. Her research center became a place where beings from all species could come to better understand decision-making and probability. Young Veltherans, curious about the princess they had been taught to fear, started asking questions that their elders couldn't answer. Elder Suho became the leader of a reform movement on Velthera, teaching that seeing multiple paths wasn't heresy but wisdom. It was slow, dangerous work, but he had allies now, including Prince Tayun, who used his position as heir to protect the reformers. Ambassador Yuna was promoted to the Council's human representative, recognition of how humanity had solved a crisis that others had considered unsolvable. In her acceptance speech, she credited Kian as an example of what humans could contribute to the galaxy. The stubborn belief that no problem was truly impossible, that every person deserved dignity, and that change was always possible if you were brave enough to choose it. As for Kian, he was offered a promotion to Chief Diplomatic Engineer, a role that would have given him prestige and power. He turned it down. Instead, he accepted a position as Leora's cultural liaison, helping her navigate the complex social landscape of the station and supporting her research. Do Yen called him crazy for giving up the promotion, but Kan didn't care. He had learned something important during the trial of paths. Life wasn't about following the safest route or the most prestigious path. It was about making choices that aligned with who you were and what you valued. And he valued this. The work he did with Leora, the conversations they had late at night about philosophy and possibility, the small victories as more species began questioning their assumptions about fate and choice. It might not be glamorous, but it was meaningful. One evening, nearly a year after the trial, Kian and Leora stood together on the observation deck that had become their favorite spot. The station rotated slowly, giving them a view of the entire galaxy spread out in brilliant colors against the black of space. I've been thinking, Leora said, her voice thoughtful, about the future. Not the paths I can see, but the one I want to create. I want to go back to Velthera eventually. Not as a prisoner or even as an ambassador, but as someone who can help my people understand what you showed me. That you have choices? That having choices is what makes us alive. That uncertainty isn't something to fear, but something to embrace. It won't be easy. The priests still have power, and many of my people are afraid of change. But you'll have help, Kian said. Taeyeon, Elder Suo, all the reformers. And you'll have me, if you want. Leora looked at him, those violet eyes still infinite, but now holding warmth instead of just sadness. Always, you gave me something no one else could. You saw me when everyone else looked away. You chose to risk everything for someone you barely knew. That kind of courage is rare in the galaxy. I just did what felt right. That's what makes you special. You don't overthink it. You just see what needs to be done, and you do it. It's very human of you. Kian laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel past. Somewhere out there, civilizations rose and fell, Empires maintained their power, and the galaxy continued its ancient dance. But here, on this station where countless species met and mingled, two people had proven that individual choices mattered, that one person refusing to accept injustice could change everything. Leora reached out and took Kian's hand. It was a simple gesture, but it carried profound meaning. A year ago, she couldn't have done this. She would have been isolated, untouchable, existing in the spaces between everyone else's lives. Now she was here, holding hands with a human engineer who had challenged an empire and won. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." "Thank you for saving me at the council trial," Kian replied. "For defending me when you could have stayed silent. For choosing to trust me." "We chose each other," Leora said. "And that makes all the difference." As they walked away from the viewport, heading toward whatever future they would create together, neither of them looked back. The past was fixed, unchangeable, but the future stretched out before them in infinite possibility, waiting to be shaped by the choices they would make. And if there was one thing that both humans and reformed Veltherans were learning, it was that the best futures weren't predetermined by fate. They were built by people brave enough to choose their own path. One decision at a time, the galaxy was changing. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. And it had started with something as simple as one person refusing to look away, refusing to accept that anyone should be invisible. In the end, that was the most human thing of all. The stubborn, beautiful insistence that everyone mattered, that everyone deserved to be seen. The story didn't end there, of course. Stories never really end. They just continue in new directions, branching into possibilities that no one can fully predict. But that was okay. Uncertainty, as Kian had taught Leora, wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. Because in uncertainty lived hope, and hope was what made tomorrow worth reaching for.